Yeah, so I want to give this tip a little bit differently than how people typically give them on the show, and hopefully this isn't like too rebellious of me, but that's what I do, right? So my tip would be this: I think a lot about, what am I going to do with my son, like when this situation arises, or if this should happen. And I think it's really important to be proactive with the way that you're raising your kids. 100%. I think that that's a good mindset. But also, there's this thing of peace and of acceptance in what's happening in this child's life, because they're figuring their own shit out, for lack of a better term. And hopefully, you can say that on this
Oh
podcast.
yes. Oh
but
yes.
but the idea here is how are we nurturing leaders, right? Not how are we imposing our will onto our kids to make sure that they don't have the same problems we did. And so I think my advice is this: is that recently I was talking to one of my best friends, and he was explaining, that one of his roles in his daughter's lives is to be somebody that essentially helps them to right the ship. So like when they do something wrong, to sit with them and say, okay, so that was wrong, but what are we going to do better next time? And in my thought is this: when I would do something wrong, my dad would come to me and just listen. He wouldn't come to me and say, what'd you do and what'd you learn from it? He would just listen. He would listen, and he would be empathetic inside of that situation, and he would understand this fact, bro, which is that at 18 years old, and even at 21 years old, there is no one on this earth that has it all figured out, or that is so self-aware and situationally aware that they can take advice from a father or a father figure and somehow compute that and change their life in that moment, right? What happens is that when you travel back in time and tell your 18-year-old self the one thing that you wish you knew, your 18-year-old self in that moment looks you dead in the eye, like turns around in silence, gets in his car, chugs a beer, throws it out the window, like does a donut in the driveway, flicks you off, and just drives away, right? Because that's who we are, right? And we have to come to this. I think we have to come to these terms that our children are literally clones of us,
Hmm.
and it doesn't really matter how proactive we are about what we think is going to happen or occur, what we know has happened or occurred with us. It's about their journey. And so really my tip is to enjoy all the suck. Just embrace it and enjoy it. And the thing is that there might be tears in that enjoyment in some cases. I know there was with my dad and I, because I went through some pretty rough things at a couple points in my life. But I always could count on my father to listen. And I think when I came to a realization that my dad would never judge, my dad would never give advice that was unwarranted, because a lot of us think that way, right? We're like, oh God, I don't want to tell my dad because he's going to say these things that I know he's going to say already, right? It's just like this giant stereotype that we live in, right? So
Hmm.
so just embrace it. You just listen, just love, just let them figure out for themselves how they're going to rise from the occasion.